Hi everybody, I'm Vicki. I'm an alcoholic. Among other things, yeah. And Conrad is right. I did become an Al-Anon when I got sober. I had to calm down again because Brenda got me worked up there. I am so grateful and so honored that I was able to be asked to do this. It's so out of my comfort zone. You have no idea. People have been praying for me constantly because they know what a wimp I am in front of people. I'm very grateful to be able to share my story, and I just hope that somebody can get something out of it today. And the best thing about AA today for me is getting to be so closely connected to other women in recovery. There's no greater joy in my life, and I know it sounds crazy because I have kids and a husband and marriage and all that kind of stuff, but that is truly the joy that I get, is to be able to see someone set free from this horrible, horrible disease we have. And it is a disease, and it will take us. It will take us out if we let it. But we have a power greater than ourselves who can restore us to sanity, and we don't have to succumb to this horrible disease. And so that's what I'm so excited about. And that's what I want to share today, if I can stop crying. Anyway, I was thinking about, I'm Vicki, I'm an alcoholic, and my dry date is August 23rd of 1988. And now, that didn't mean all the craziness went away and my life got perfect, okay? That's not what that means. That means that my journey began that day when I finally was able to put the alcohol down, the drugs down, the mood and mind-altering substances down by the grace of God. And I hadn't found AA yet because I was too young. I was not an alcoholic, and Conrad's right. I could not accept at age 25 that I could be an alcoholic. It took a long time for me to come to that realization. But in the meantime, I had seen a counselor because I had another suicide attempt. You know how we are. And because nobody understood me. Nobody. And so I'd gone to see a counselor, and she started asking questions. She didn't even accuse me of possibly being an alcoholic. She started asking about alcoholism in our family, and I was offended. And, do you have any alcoholism in your family? And I was like, well, I'm sure there's a drunk uncle somewhere. But no, we did. Our family is riddled with alcoholics. And in fact, my grandfather, my mother's father, after the story about my mother, she was devastated in her childhood by an alcoholic father. So I have a lot of mercy and grace for her today. And I'm so grateful that she was given to be my mother. And I understand this disease so much better today that I'm able to just let go and let her be who she needs to be and love her where she's at. But she was devastated by this disease. And anyway, but there is alcoholism in our family, and it comes right down through the family line on both sides. And we also have mental illness on one side of our family, which is fun too. We just make for a nice medley of interesting stuff. But today, none of that stuff has to rule and control my life. Whatever it is, whoever it is, whatever I have to deal with today, I do not have to succumb to the insanity that wants to take me out of this world like that. And it is so exciting to be able to share that. And so I went to this counselor, and she started asking about alcoholism in the family. And at that point, I was not an alcoholic. I'm only 25 years old. And there's just no way. Those are old men under bridges and trench coats. They are not young women in graduate school. They are not. That's not who are alcoholics. And so I put the alcohol down abruptly and had DTs in my living room, fell flat on my face on the floor and shook for several days. But I was fine. I am not an alcoholic, and I don't need alcohol. Thank you very much. I don't have to have it. Yeah, Conrad would check on me every couple of days just to see if I was still alive, you know. But because I was so nuts without alcohol, actually helped me cope. And so when I took that abruptly away out of my life, I couldn't cope. And so I became It was the first semester I did get all A's in graduate school, though, because I focused wholly and completely on getting that job done. And but when I was home alone, I was completely insane. And I was completely lost in that insanity, that abyss, that loneliness that I guess only alcoholics fully understand. And I don't know why I'm crying. Brenda, you got me crying here. But it's the four horsemen we talk about. And anyway, so I was not an alcoholic. I don't have a problem with alcohol, so I'm going along, rocking along that fall. And that was in August of '88. And by that fall, a crazy thing happened. I was talking to a young woman who I was really close to. And I knew her from the church community, but I also knew that she was a drinker, so I could talk to her. She would understand. And I said, my counselor is making suggestions that I might be an alcoholic, and she said, and I had no idea she had a drinking problem. She looked at me and said, oh my gosh, Vicki, I have been in AA for 2 months now, and I will take you to your first meeting. I was like, whoa, hold the phone. Well, I don't know that this is what I need to do, but anyway, so because it was her, and I've always been a sucker for close friends who are women. They can talk me into all kinds of stuff, and so because it was her, and I absolutely adored her, I went ahead and went to this strange planet called AA. And in those days, a lot of the AA meetings would be in a big basement. Well, this one was in a big basement about the size of this room. And there was smoke that hung about right here. It was like, where's the fire? And I didn't smoke yet at that point. I picked up that addiction after I met you guys. Yeah, I just want to say thanks. But anyway, I walked in that room with that smoke hanging, and I thought, wow, that's just really intense. This is in the basement of a church, And then we sat down, and there was just a few people shared in this meeting. There were probably 60 people. There wasn't quite this many people in the room, but I sat down and listened to some of them talk, and there was one man who was obviously one of the leaders in this situation, it seemed, and he starts using the F-bomb and God in the same sentence. And those are just two things that didn't mix. It's not that I didn't do them, they just never mixed. God's over here and my F-bomb's over here. And he's using them together, and I thought, well, this is just really strange. So I didn't think I was an alcoholic, and I went home, and I still didn't drink, though, but I knew by that following January I was going to drink again, because I just knew. You just know that you know that you know. I knew this wasn't going to be a forever thing for Vicki. I was going to have a drink at some point, because that's my best friend. That's how I coped. And if you had my life, you'd have to drink too. Everybody just treats me like shit, I have to drink. And so, because I was a victim, just to clarify. And that was my first run-in with my first sponsor. She didn't understand that. She didn't understand I was a victim. And she kept thinking differently, and I just tried to convince her every time. So I didn't talk to her very often, because she didn't see things my way. But anyway, I would get desperate enough that I'd think, well, maybe I better call Delphia today. Because I'd be thinking those suicidal thoughts again. I didn't act on it once I got in recovery. But anyway, by that January, I went to an AA meeting in College Station. I was living in College Station, the Brazos Club. And I don't know if anybody's ever been there. But I went there, and I sat all the way down in that chair. And it was a meeting kind of like this, the meetings we have here where people talked around the room kind of thing. And people started talking. That meeting was about fear. And as I would listen to people talk about how fear has ruled their life, I realized that fear had ruled my life. I didn't understand I was an alcoholic yet, but I was like, my gosh, that's me. Fear just rules everything I do, every decision I make, every direction I go in. It was like I had a spiritual awakening in that first meeting, and I finally heard my story for the first time in those rooms. And that's when I went to Conrad and said, oh my gosh, these people know what they're talking about. Except my sponsor. So, anyway. I love Delphia. She's gone up to be with the Big Book meeting in Sky back in 2012. So I haven't been able to talk to her since then. But she was a tremendous influence. Sometimes I think that first sponsor is the one who impacts you the most. It's kind of like imprinting with a baby duck, you know? I'll have what she's doing. So she when I met her in a women's meeting, she had 2.5 years of sobriety. I had a little bit of time, but I was kind of nutty. And I thought, 2.5 years without a drink? Oh my gosh. She must be brilliant. Well, she wasn't brilliant because she wouldn't let me be the victim, but she was really a gentle soul. And that she was exactly who I needed to be my sponsor. And God knew that. We would sit out in her garden with her happy chickens. And she would pick the caterpillars off and give them to her happy chickens while we would talk. And she was a gardener, and so she taught me a lot about sobriety through gardening. And we would talk about pulling the weeds and getting this done and making the rows and the stuff that was no fun to me. I didn't like that sort of stuff. I like to party. I like to have fun. I didn't like to do the grunt work that we needed to do to get happy, joyous, and free. I thought you got happy, joyous, and free by having fun and doing stupid stuff, you know? But that got me more and more miserable instead of happy, joyous, and free. And the worse my choices were, the more miserable I became, the more I had to drink. The more I had to drink, the worse my choices became. The more I felt bad about myself, the more I had to have relief. And it was a vicious cycle I found myself in. I hated myself, in fact, and I knew God hated me even more, so that's where I started. I started with a God who hated me. That was the God of my understanding, absolutely hated and despised me, and understandably so, but we're going to party and have fun until we die, because that's the only relief I could imagine, because that was my best thinking at that point. So anyway, I would call Delphia and I would ask her, could I really be an alcoholic? I'm only 26. At that point, I had gotten my birthday in the meantime. Could I really be an alcoholic? I'm only 26. And she'd say, well, only you can figure that out for yourself. And I'd call her a month later, maybe 2 months. And I'd say, am I really an alcoholic? And then one day I called her, and it was right before I got married, actually. And I still wasn't sure if I was an alcoholic. I'd been in the program, but I did know that when I went to meetings, I felt better. That's all I knew. But I couldn't be an alcoholic. I'm too young. I just couldn't. But I did feel better. And so one time I was about to get into this thing called marriage, and I was like, I don't know what I'm thinking. This is the craziest thing I've ever attempted, because I don't do commitments. I mean, the next thing I know, I'm committed to somebody and I'm running around with other guys or whatever I'm doing. I do stupid stuff. I don't need to be in a marriage, is all I can think to myself. But she said to me, when I asked her that day, I said, could I really be an alcoholic? And she said, Vicki, does it really matter? Going to those meetings helps you, and you feel better when you go. And it was like something fell off my eyes or something, and it's like, I'm an alcoholic. Oh, crap, I'm an alcoholic. How did that happen? How did that happen to such a nice girl like me? But when I drink, I'm like George Thorogood. I drink, and I like to drink alone, and I don't like to be bothered, and I like to drink a lot, and I like to have a big stash, and I don't want you to mess with me. And if you want to drink, well, maybe you're cool and somebody I could talk to in those days, but I did not want to accept the fact that I might be. Now, I could accept the fact that I might be mentally ill, I might be crazy or something like that, but I could not accept the fact that I was an alcoholic for that long period of time, because that meant the solution was like diabetes. Conrad was talking about, there's a solution, and I don't like that solution. That means it takes my best friend away from me that worked, but then my best friend stopped working. But anyway, I stayed sober through that whole time, dry, I should say, and Conrad's got to be one of the bravest men on the planet. He's the only person in this room who has actually seen me drunk. It's been a while, by the grace of God, but he is the only person in this room who's actually seen me drink and seen some of the wreckage of my drinking and still wanted to get married to me. I never could figure that out. Do you know what you're doing? But I guess denial is an amazing thing, you know. But anyway, we proceeded with that. We went ahead and got married, and it just scared me to death to think about getting married. But I did it anyway. Because I really thought I wasn't going to get married after that. I had a really sick relationship that I'd been involved in during a lot of my drinking years, and I decided I wasn't going to get married. Marriage was not for Vicki. And the only thing that changed my mind is when I ran into Conrad. I thought, well, this really square guy, he was really square. But I thought, you know, there's something really special about him, and I think I'd be crazy not to marry him. And there was that thought in the back of my head, so I went ahead and did that. And so, anyway, we got married and decided to do Al-Anon AA together. We had meetings like in Michigan and stuff that we would go to together, and we had like a big family group. And that's where that story about Scott was. Scott was the dude who turned like really clean cut and normal after he got into recovery. It was really amazing. It's amazing what God can do when we let him. It's really amazing. And that's my story, because I would try to talk to Delphia, and she wasn't hearing it, you know, about the victim stuff. She wasn't hearing it. And I just thought she was the meanest person. That's why I thought she was mean. She wasn't hearing it. She wasn't going to see things my way. And I remember my first 4-step, and that's Conrad kind of prompted me to talk about that. My first 4-step I did with her, it said, do a fearless moral inventory and this, that, and the other, you know. So I did. I did a fearless and searching moral inventory of every dirty deed anyone had ever done to me. Because it said to start with your resentments. So I did. I wrote my resentments. And I mean, it was page after page after page. And if you're on planet Earth, you find that there's reason to be resentful if you're not careful. Because people are people. But after she listened to that whole thing, she finally listened to me. I had a hostage. I thought. Until her really sweet comment. And she was so sweet. She said, could you have any small part in any of this? Oh my gosh, I was offended. She had not gotten the point again, obviously. She missed the point again. Oh, I was so offended. I looked at her and I didn't say anything, because I didn't want to offend her, but I was like, damn. But that was one of the first fissures that hit that concrete block that resided on top of my shoulders. I don't know if any of y'all have had one of those. I didn't have a head for a long time. I just had this concrete cylinder that was on my shoulders. And that question that she asked put a fissure in it. And all of a sudden, a little bit of light started shining through that fissure. And I went home, and then she had the audacity at the end of that 5th step, get this, to cover a few character defects that we might have unearthed. The concrete block. It took a long time. That's why I had to get in recovery early. But she uncovered one that, and of course I disagreed with her on all these, because I was the most open-minded, most compassionate, caring person I knew, you know. I mean, I was running around with drug addicts and everything else, you know, and I accepted them and loved them, and everybody loved everybody, and in fact, it was the squares that I was actually questionable about. You know, they were kind of square. I didn't understand them. But she said one of my character defects was self-righteousness. I mean, seriously, I couldn't have been self-righteous. And then she said I was judgmental. And she also said that I had a problem with perfectionism. And I thought, oh my gosh, I mean, there's no way I could, because, I was pretty crazy. How could perfection be one of my problems? Well, all three of those things have been the core of my character defects that I've had to deal with for the next almost 3 decades now. And I remember going home, it was like that fissure was in that concrete block, I went home and she said, now you need to sit down and read these couple sentences, about 6 and 7, and spend some time alone to think about what we talked about. Yeah. But I did, and that's when God first started getting a hold of me. And I began to think about, could I be judgmental? No, not me. But that thought just kept in the back of my mind. The things that they would talk about in meetings, what she talked about, would stay there. They wouldn't go away. They were nagging thoughts that just would not go away. And I began to think about, these things. And then I started spending time. Oh, I never did talk about my third step. That was another interesting one. But basically, I got on my knees with an old cowboy down in the Brazos Club who said, you need to get on your knees and do this third step prayer with me. Because I'd done it. I turned everything over to God on my own time, by myself. It was done. I'm ready to move forward. And he got me down on my knees. And that was the day that I, for the first time, and this was before I did the thing about the victim with my sponsor, that was the day that for the first time I thought, okay, maybe I can let this God who hates and despises me, I really did think God hated me, maybe I can let him help me. We're not going to let him have control, but maybe he can help me. So I did that third step with kind of that in mind. I'll let him try to help me. And turns out that's been the most crucial relationship in my recovery. And today, miracles do happen. There's several miracles that have happened, but one of my miracles is through the people in this program, and down in the Brazos Club at that time, they would talk about the God of their understanding, and they would be kind to me, and they would do nice things. And that was the first time I was able to grasp and understand unconditional love, was through the love that these people showed me in these rooms. And it was through that experience I began to think, maybe God doesn't love me, or doesn't hate me. Maybe God actually loves me, And I thought I had to get good to get to God, so we were out of luck. I really thought that's how it had to be, that I had to get myself cleaned up and get good and not drink and not sleep around and not do this and not do that. And then God would accept me. I didn't know that God loved me the whole time. I just didn't know. But it still blows me away today to think about it. Because even though I got rid of those other things and got cleaned up on that stuff, then I had a whole other crazy bunch of stuff that we had to deal with that Conrad was talking about. Because I had a lot of sick and twisted and warped thinking that had to be dealt with and healed. And I had to recover from a lot of stuff from this disease other than just putting the drink down. I had to recover from the twisted messages, the things that don't work. Anyway, it's been a long process, and it's been a hard process at times. And then there's also been a lot of joy at times. And like I said, there's for me no greater joy than to pass the message on to the next suffering alcoholic, and usually woman. I mean, I'm sure I share meetings for guys and they get something, I don't know, but the main people I get to work with, I have the privilege of working with, are the women in recovery. And it's a tremendous privilege, and it's so exciting to see someone set free. If you haven't had that opportunity, you got to work with people, seriously, even if it's not perfect. Because I thought I had to do sponsorship perfectly. That's another thing, because everything had to be done perfectly. And if I didn't say the right thing, that person's going to drink. And if I said the right thing, that person would stay sober, and all this kind of crap, And it's not about me. It's about me sharing the experience I had to get free from this thing with that person. And then if they want it, they can have it. And if they don't, they won't. And it's not up to me. And so I began to let God have that. And so I've been able to work with even more people because I don't sit around at night going, is she going to drink? Is she going to call me? My first sponsee, I got to share this story. I did actually have someone around that time when I was doing the crazy stuff. I was about 18. Oh, I gave my first talk when I was 17 months sober. I ran across that the other day and was amazed that it's the same thing I'm doing today. The exact same thing. Turn it over and let God do it. I was like, well, that's so unique and so new 30 years later. But it works. So, but anyway, I can't remember what I was talking about, but yeah, oh, my first sponsee. Okay, I was married to Conrad at the time. We were newlyweds. I mean, we were just starting to get to know each other. And then the crazy people started coming into our house, because I hang out with crazy people. Who are these people? But anyway, I was working with, I remember her name, but for reasons of anonymity, I won't give it. But she was, she made me look sane and calm. Would you be my sponsor? Well, sure. Why not? I've done the 4th and 5th step, and I'm working on the 6th and 7th, and my 8th and 9th step is really kind of sucky right now, but I'm getting it done, so we might as well try. So anyway, she would call, collect. In those days, you didn't have cell phones. And so she would travel, she would use, and she was doing hard drugs and stuff too. She wasn't, I was mainly a drunk, but she was doing all kinds of crazy drugs and stuff, whatever was going on in those days. And then she would travel and hitchhike around the country. And then she'd get on payphones at 2 a.m. and call me collect. And I'd take it because I wanted to help her. Oh my gosh, I got to take this call. And Connor would be like, at 2 a.m.? And of course, we're paying for the collect calls too. And we didn't have a lot of money in those days, but it was for the cause of AA. And, oh my gosh. Just to let y'all know, I won't be taking your collect call at 2 a.m. Just saying. But I love y'all, but I do have boundaries today. Although I do flex, even with that. It's not, nothing is black and white today. But don't call me at 2 a.m. But no, I will. I shouldn't say never ever or things like that, because I've learned with God, never ever is not part of the deal. But usually the people I'm working with don't today. But I'm so grateful because it was through those experiences. The next, I had other people that never called me and stuff, and I took that personally, But I'm a sponsor, I'm like 3 years sober. Well, then we moved to Michigan when I was about 3 years sober, when we were newlyweds, and that was awesome because we had a big, huge family group up there. We'd go camping together, we sat in meetings together, and I had another sponsor then, and she was an awesome lady too. God was so good to me. He gave me the best, most awesome women for sponsors, all the way through. And I've had some awesome sponsors here in Lubbock too, and we also lived in Oklahoma for 5 years as well. And that was one of the stories I wanted to share because I don't know why I felt like sharing this, but we lived in Michigan for 5 years, and then we had this awesome family group we had to leave. We had 2 of our babies in Michigan too. And then we moved to Oklahoma for Conrad's first job. And that's a whole big mess of what happened with that. They wouldn't put him on salary, and it was horrible. We had a mortgage, this, that, and the other. I was new in town. I had 2 little babies. I couldn't go get a job. The program there really sucked in Oklahoma when we moved there. It really sucked. I would sit in the only club there was in town, and they would snicker. It was all men. Women weren't even in those rooms because the guys were so inbred. It was so bad when I first arrived. Oh my gosh. But I knew that was my lifeline. I didn't have a choice. I was 8 years sober at that point, and I knew I had to go to those meetings with those jerks. And I would share, because I'm going to share. And those guys would snicker at me and, and they, all this kind of crap. meeting after meeting. Finally, I found one woman who had some sobriety, and I asked her to be my sponsor, and she didn't have time. I was like, shit, and here I had these two little babies. Anyway, I'm giving you my sob story. But, I guess the reason I'm telling this story is there's a bulldog inside of me. I don't know if y'all have met her. Golly, those guys and nobody else can keep me from my recovery. And I was determined. And so I would go to those meetings, and finally one time, and I think there was one other woman who was with her husband in that room that day. And I turned around to one of those guys who started laughing. The minute I opened my mouth, he started laughing and snickering, and I turned around and I just looked at him. And he just kind of, because bullies are like that. And I looked at him, and he went, he said, what? I said, I was just wondering what was so funny. If you could share that with me. Nobody ever snickered at me again in that meeting. And I kept coming back to that AA group because it was the only one in town at that point. And women started showing up. By golly. And I hugged and loved on the women, and the next thing you know, there was almost as many women as men by the time we left Oklahoma in that group. And so one person can make a difference. Right. Even if you find a group that's not very healthy or functional, and I say healthy or functional because most people they don't want to be hard to be with. But even if one finds a group like that, I told myself, girl, you can bring yourself and you can make it better just because you're there. And so that's what I did. And I knew with God's help that was possible. And it was really awesome. We even started a women's meeting in that group. And it was awesome. And it just turned out to be a really special place for me. And I was still crazy. You know, things were still crazy going on. I had 2 little kids. I was depressed and catatonic half the time. And I went back to that same woman who said she didn't have time. I went back to her because I prayed about it. I was like, God, I need a sponsor. And there's no women around here to sponsor me. And I need a sponsor. And he said, go ask her again. And I went back to her. And I asked her again, and I said, God says you're supposed to be my sponsor. I like to put it on God, put the header on him. She said, well, okay, I guess we better get started then. So we did, and she turned out to be another awesome sponsor. And anyway, I miss her too. And we stayed in Oklahoma for 5 years, and then we came to this amazing little place called Lubbock, Texas. And I ended up, it was a lot easier to adjust to Lubbock than it was the AA program in Oklahoma. But by the time we left Oklahoma, I missed everybody there, you know. Anyway, part of that story too, when I was about 8 years sober and all that other crap was going on and I couldn't get a decent AA meeting and I couldn't find a sponsor and all that kind of stuff, when we moved there and we had a mortgage payment and no income, and it was a hairy big mess at that point, and I had the 2 little babies, which I didn't do babies that well anyway, on top of everything else. But that was when I had one of my times when I went to Conrad and said to him, you know, I haven't had a drink in 8 years. Maybe I'm not an alcoholic. I mean, because alcoholics drink, you know. And maybe I can drink. There he is laughing. Because he knew me when I drank. He knew how I drank. And when he wasn't in denial. But I got to pick on him a little bit. But anyway, I was convinced maybe I could take a drink and maybe it was a good idea. And anyway, when he started laughing, I had quit smoking at that point too. Again, I was kept quitting and picking them up, But I quit smoking for a while, and so I thought, well, what I'll do, since I can't go to an AA meeting where I can really find any comfort right now, I'm going to go get myself another pack of cigarettes and start smoking again. So I got back in that addiction. But anyway, it all worked out eventually. And then I was sad to leave Oklahoma when we had to leave there. And then I arrived here and I started going to the Lubbock group. And anyway, again, I had stopped smoking for a little bit of time, but then I started smoking again after the move. But I ran into some really amazing people, and I've had 3 sponsors, one just briefly when I first got here, but then I got another sponsor who became my sponsor here in Lubbock, and she now has since gotten Alzheimer's, dementia. A bunch of you guys in this room know her. Cindy Businger, and I still miss her and her wise counsel and her prayers, and she meant so much to me. There's so many people that touch your heart on such a deep level in this program, and if you haven't experienced that, just keep coming back, because we don't just connect on the surface here. We connect with our hearts, and that's where the healing takes place for me. Is connecting and getting real in my heart. My heart's pretty messed up at times, and I need help unwinding it and getting it kind of worked out. So, anyway, I'm not sure how long I'm talking or how long I should talk. Wrap it up? Keep going. Okay. How many?
15. 5, 10, 15.
Ooh. Okay. And I haven't even gotten out of, okay, so we came here to Lubbock. Oh, another story that I've always loved is when we were up in Michigan, and that's when I really started trying to figure out the 6th and 7th step. I couldn't quite figure, I did do some amends, like 8th and 9th step amends when I was in College Station with my parents and different people. But, and my sponsor helped me because I had some people on that list that needed to be taken off, and then I had put people on the list, hadn't put people on the list that she put on there. So she was always so bossy about stuff. But she knew exactly what I needed, and she had told me to leave that one ex-boyfriend alone and not bother him. So I had to give him, I wanted to give him a piece of my mind, give him my side of the story. But I did, I let it go. And I did what she told me on that, which helped because about 8 years later, when we were living in Michigan, I went back for his father's funeral, and then on that day I was able to make my amends. So God had it all covered. And on that day I was healthy enough to be in a place where I could actually be a benefit to him or me or anybody. Had I tried to do it earlier, I wouldn't have been. But when we were in Michigan, I was really struggling. I love step 11. Oh, I love that step, the St. Francis prayer, and it's all so pretty and nice and talking to God, who at that point sort of liked me a little bit. But I couldn't get that 6th and 7th step in. I couldn't understand the stuff that she and I had talked about even years ago at that point. I couldn't understand how I was so self-righteous or how I was such a perfectionist. And anyway, and then all I could think of is I'm smoking like a chimney, and I'm being a rageaholic. I was a rageaholic at that time on Conrad. We didn't have children yet, and those must be the character defects that we're working on. And the harder I would try to not smoke and not be a rageaholic, the more I would do it. And I don't know if any of y'all have ever experienced those sort of things. But anyway, I went into a meeting, and the meeting was on the 6th step. And it was another one of those rooms where the smoke hung in the air, but by that point I was adding to the smoke population. And I sat down in that meeting, and for the first time, they read the 6th step, and then we talked about it. Let's see if I want to get this right. We were entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character. And it was like a spiritual awakening again. I heard the word God. I thought I was supposed to get myself all cleaned up again, like we were talking about earlier. Like I was supposed to get perfect to get to God. I didn't know I was supposed to partner with God, and I still didn't fully understand it. Then I thought, oh, God's just going to take it all away. But still, I began to understand over time, because it takes me so long to learn these spiritual concepts. It takes me so long. That's why God had to start early with me. That it was a partnership for me. And that we were going to start working together. But I didn't even fully understand that till years later. But I did hear finally that I wasn't going to be able to do all this by myself. I wasn't going to be able to get all that stuff worked out. And it turned out that God had other character defects he needed to deal with first. He had a different priority list than I did. So anyway, Lindy, could you let me know when it's like 5 minutes or something so I can pay attention? So anyway, I keep jumping back from Lubbock to Michigan. Now I'm back in Lubbock again. Anyway, I ended up at the Southwest group because I had to quit smoking. It was killing me. I was starting to have lung problems, and I could see that I was going to have some long-term effects if I didn't. And I just couldn't quit because I wanted to smoke with my buddies at the Lubbock group. And I love getting to the Lubbock group, but I still miss the people over there a lot. But I ended up going to the Southwest group, and that was a really small little place, I guess because most alcoholics wanted to smoke, you know. But I don't know why, but it was a really small place when I first arrived there, and I went to meetings with Cindy, my sponsor, and Brad was there. I don't know if he's here. Hey, Brad. Brad was there, and got named Pat and stuff, and we just had the sweetest little meetings, and it really helped me a lot to be in a place where there was no smoke, and I could start letting go of that finally let go of that. And not have to smoke to be okay. Because it was hard to quit smoking too. It was almost as hard for me to quit smoking as it was for me to quit drinking. And it just about killed me. I would go and lock myself in my bedroom when the kids would drive me crazy, which they did almost every day. But I'm not the parent that they go to for all their consoling and everything. They're like, oh, that's Mom. The one we drive her crazy. But I do love them, and they know that. And it is funny because we do have a home that's different from the home that we came from, the homes we came from. It's not perfect. We don't have a perfect home. That was something else I wanted to share before I close. The one thing I've learned in this journey, and it took me a long time, and it's been probably in the last 5 years that it's really gotten, not just from my head to my heart, but into my gut, was I kept thinking I was going to get all my ducks in a row, or I was going to get my act together. I mean, late in sobriety, I'm like 15 years sober, and I'm still like, I can't seem to get it all figured out, you know? But I thought that was the goal, that I was supposed to get it all figured out and get all the ducks in a row and get all the kids in, you know, good working order or whatever. And I never was very good at any of that stuff because I had a perfect manager in my home who took care of a lot of that stuff, which I'm grateful. But I have learned how to do more of that myself, and my Al-Anon has grown stronger and stronger in the force as we collide with one another. Because I became an Al-Anon. It's true. I just haven't showed up at y'all's doorstep yet. But anyway, and I lost my train of thought again. Anyway, we do have a home that's different from the homes we came out of. And I'm about to start crying again because it's amazing what can happen, is what I'm saying. I never thought I could ever be married 20-something years. I mean, it never crossed my mind that I could ever be in a marriage for 27 years. It blows me away sometimes, even now. I know it's by God's grace, because that wasn't my natural way to have those kind of commitments going on. I ran, man. I was gone. And it's amazing what one can learn if one stays in sobriety and stays married and stays in these things. It's amazing the depth of understanding that can be gotten no other way. And for me, it's amazing because you really learn what love means when you really hate somebody and love them at the same time. You begin to understand what love means. It's not about feel good all the time, you know? But our kids have a home. In fact, they won't leave. But it's a tremendous miracle. I mean, our families of origin are like, that's just weird. All of our kids couldn't wait to get away from us. What's the deal? And I'm like, I don't know, but I do know one thing, and this is what I want to say if I don't say anything else today, that I've learned in recovery. What I've recovered in recovery. It wasn't just sobriety. What I recovered in sobriety was real love. That's what I've recovered. I thought it was about getting my act together or getting perfect, or in the early days getting good to get to God, or whatever it was, to be accepted. But what I've learned is it's about learning how to love and be loved. That's what it's about for me today. And I do that by practicing the steps. I do that by following the suggestions y'all make. I do those things. That's how I learn how to love, because for an alcoholic, that's how the steps really help me. They help me learn not to get perfect, not to get my act together. My home's not perfect. My relationship with my husband's not perfect. My relationship with my kids is definitely not perfect. But there's love there in the midst of us all. And for me, the God of my understanding is love. That's who I've come to know in this program. And I've found him in other places too, not just here. Just if y'all were wondering. But I don't know much about God. I don't understand God and all this kind of stuff. But I know today that when there's love, and you can feel it when there's love, that God's there. I promise you. When you feel, because you can feel love in the atmosphere. I can. I'm just goofy that way. But when there is love, there is God. And that doesn't mean it's perfect, and it doesn't mean that we don't all have clay feet and we're not doing stupid stuff as fast as we can. Because we are, all of us. But it means that there's something greater than ourselves restoring us to something called sanity. And to me today, sanity is learning to love. I think that's it. Is that it, Linda? Okay.